This is a chapter on personality. So here we're going to talk about theories of personality. We're finally going to talk about Sigmund Freud and some of his theories. Do you have a personality? I sure hope so, right? Of course you do, right? And it's a very unique one. If this was a smaller class, and actually I used to teach a course on the theories of personality, a whole 15-week course, and I would have you write what your personality is and tell me about all the traits and everything else. And if we did that, and if we sat in this class for, this is what, the 11th week of the semester, we'd probably get to know each other pretty well. And then you'd probably see how unique everyone is. Right? You all are very unique individuals with unique personalities. And we'll talk about the reasons for that today. So this is not for any points. This is just an opinion question. What is the primary factor that you think it is, that determines a person's personality? Do you think our personalities are formed in infancy by our parents and they've kind of molded us? You think a person's personality is more in their DNA, more in terms of genetics, that you were born with specific personality traits? Do you think it was more of situations across the lifespan create our personalities? Stuff happens in your life, and it's the way you react to it and the way the environment reacts to mold you? Or is it deep unconscious conflicts the primary determinant of your personality? What do you think? What do you think is the primary factor? Now, what these questions are as well, it's we're going to do different theories, and there are many, many different theories of how we got to be who we are, and these are kind of some of the theories that are there. Some people really believe in one of these, and that's it, not the other one. And over the decades, various psychologists have argued about what was the greatest influence on us and how we got to be who we are. But in terms of what you're saying, yeah, majority of you say situations across the lifespan create our personalities, things that happen in our lives. In actuality, if I put a 5 on there, all of the above, really it probably would be all of the above, because all of these have an influence on you and how you got to be who you are. So how do you get to be who you are? Now, as I go through this chapter, once again, I'm going to give you the theories on this, but you also might want to sit here and think about, well, what about me? How did I get to be who I was? What was my greatest influences on me? And as I go through this chapter, I'll prompt you with some of those questions as well. Because once again, what I'm trying to do with you is give you the theories, but then have you think about yourselves. And a lot of us don't do this. We don't think about how we got to be who we are, which I guess since I'm trained as a psychologist, I always thought, how can you not think that way? Okay? Because it's all about your life. And the more you know about yourself, the better off I think you're going to wind up being. But how do we get to be who we are? Well, I've got an answer for that, right? It's the same answer I used for the whole semester. Okay? And that's an interaction between bio, okay? Remember the bio part? Genetics, okay? Neurochemicals, which is brain chemistry, hormones, right? Brain structure that's there. We look at the psychological part. We talked about life scripts, if you remember. We talked about conditioning and modeling. And then when we talked about social, we talked about all the environmental issues, culture and religion and parents and school and on and on. And all that together makes you who you are. Okay? And that's what makes you so unique, because the variables are so large. I mean, even if you have a brother or a sister, okay, people raised in the same family, similar environmental issues, not the same, but similar, okay, similar, some genetic structure that's there. The two of you can be completely different. Some similarities, but absolutely different because of all these different variables that are there. So we truly are very, very unique individuals. All right, what was the most important influence on your personality and how you get to be who you are? What's the most important influence? Neuropsychology, everything that goes on in the brain, parents, friends, religion, school. By the way, when we talk about who you are, okay, and I'm asking you now to think about that, from a practicing therapist point of view, what I tried to do with people, no matter what the issues were, is try to get people first to understand who they are. Right? So it's the old know thyself. Then what I try to get people to do is once you figure out who you are, then you need to be able to accept yourself, right? Accept thyself with all your flaws and your strengths and everything else. Then the last part of all that is be thyself, right? Just be that self. Too many people are trying to be what other people want them to be or what they're striving to be, and some of us don't have the brain for math, okay? Or we don't have the brain for different things. So you really need to figure out who you are, know thyself, okay? Then you need to be able to or understand yourself, then be yourself. And the last one was be thyself, was know thyself, understand thyself, be thyself, know thyself, be thyself. So trying to work all of that out, it's going to lead your life to be much, much happier. Some of you are sitting here and say, well, that's me. I do all that. Well, that's great. You probably have a much easier life than other people who are trying to force themselves into being somebody that they're not. So the most greatest influence on a lot of you was parents. And you're absolutely right. You're with these people for an awful lot of years. Right? So they do have a huge influence on you, whether that be from a genetic standpoint as well as social influences that are there and life scripts. All right, so let's get into it. What is personality? This term personality, your personhood. It's an individual's unique and relatively stable behavior patterns. Relatively stable. Sigmund Freud said, by the time you're about 8 to 10 years old, okay, your personality is pretty well developed, and then you spend the rest of your life maybe adapting and changing just a little bit or modifying. But it's pretty well in place. And you might want to think about yourself at 8 and 10 years old. Did you change? Were you pretty similar to that? Or have you changed at all? Now, I think that, a lot of who we are were formed in our childhoods. And a lot of people, I don't think they change very much over their lifespan. I think we may modify our patterns, but I don't think we have a lot of drastic changes. Now, maybe you have had drastic changes. I'm not saying everybody, but I think we modify those as the years go on, as we get older. But most of us have a core, stable personality that you see develop during childhood, slightly modified in adolescent years, modified a little bit more in young adulthood, and then what we see is a pretty consistent pattern occurring as people get older. Not a lot of change. When we talk about personality, we talk about a term called traits, personality traits. And I think you've heard about that. What are your personality traits? Well, traits are relatively permanent and enduring qualities of behavior that a person displays in most situations. And a fellow by the name of Allport was one of the first people to write about personality traits that are there. So what are some of your traits? Are you outgoing? Are you shy? Are you honest? Are you genuine? Are you reflective? Are you introverted? Are you kind? Are you considerate? Are you da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da? Okay, all those different personality traits. The other day I said to you, what are some traits that you might be looking for in a prospective partner? Remember I had those listed that are there? Well, those are traits that you might look for. Those people might be looking for those traits in you as well. Our friendships a lot of times may be formulated based on certain traits. People who you get along with, that's there. So we find personality traits seem to be relatively permanent. Okay? Outgoing people usually maintain their outgoingness as they throughout their life. And then there's a term called type, personality types. Categories used to describe personality, with each category representing a collection of traits. So Carl Jung was someone who talked a lot about personality types. Hopefully you've never had somebody say to you, you're not my type. Okay? You're not what they mean is personality type. Hopefully you didn't go for a job and say, excuse me, but you're not the type of person we're looking for. Well, in psychology, we usually say a type is made up of certain traits that are there. Now, you can take personality tests. Okay? And there are hundreds, probably thousands of personality tests that you can take. Some are like the California Personality Trait Inventory talks about specific traits. So you answer these paper and pencil questions about you. Then at the end it says that on a scale of 0 to 10 that you are 9 on outgoingness and 7 on kindness and 6 on whatever the different traits are there. Just to give you some information about yourself. The most famous test for types is something called the Myers-Briggs Personality Type Indicator. Some of you have taken that? No one has? Yes, some of you have. In speech class maybe, or in different classes. I know if you went for career testing, they'll give you the Strong-Campbell Interest Inventory, and they usually give you the Myers-Briggs as well. And what it does is put you into 16 different personality types that are there. And each type indicates whether or not you're extroverted, introverted, intuitive, which means look at the big picture of things, or more detailed-minded, more logical and rational, or intuitive, or logical or rational, or feeling-based in your decisions. And the last one is how you live your life. Is it in a structured, organized way, or a more flexible, spontaneous way? So they pull all that together. And then what they've done is they've taken those 16 types and then they've given that same test to like architects or physicists or counselors. And they compare the way you answer that to their answers. And they may say to you, you know, you have the personality type to be a psychologist or an educator. Right? I used that particular test for many years in marriage counseling or relationship counseling, just to see where people match up as well as what their differences may be. Okay? Carl Jung once said, opposites attract, but they don't usually stay together. Okay? And people who are similar usually stay together, but they don't have a lot of excitement in their relationships. So you're trying to find somebody who is not completely different than you, but has some similar traits, so you have similar interests and do things together, but a little bit of difference so you can learn from it. And I'll talk more about Jung and some of his theories as well. All right, so what are your traits? What do you think your types would be? And once again, if you want to go to the Career Testing Center, all that's for free. You don't have to pay for that. Might be fun just to go take some of those tests, a battery of tests that are there. You can go online, and there is the Myers-Briggs, the full version of it is not online, but there's a smaller version of it online that you can take and do that. It's always fun to kind of give it to someone you're dating, too, just to see what they're like. You can also go to Martin Seligman's site, Positive Learned Optimism. If you type that in, and he'll bring you to a site, and he has all kinds of personality tests that are very, very good. I mean, they're very well documented, they're researched, they're statistically reliable and valid, and they're for free. All you have to do is agree to become part of one of his studies, because he'll use your results to do some demographics and do some correlational studies on. But those are interesting to do as well. All right, I'll shut up. Self-concept, perception of yourself. That's another thing we look at when we look at personality. Right? What is your self-concept? And by the way, there are various psychological tests about this as well that tell you about yourself. If I said to you, what do you like physically? What do you like emotionally? What's your view of yourself in regards to intellectual, emotional, social, physical, spiritual? Well, that is what your perception of yourself. Who am I? This is how I think I am. Interesting to ask your friends, if you have your friends that gutsy enough, or people you go out and say, well, tell me about myself. What do you think of me? Gutsy enough to do that and let your friends tell you some things. But that would be, does it match your perception? Some of you, your perceptions don't match the way your friends think of yourself, okay, or the way you really act. But we take a look at that. If you look at personality tests, okay, and there's, like I said, thousands of them that are out there, if you did a multiple variable analysis on them, what you'd come up with, most tests look at what's called the 5-factor model. The 5-factor model. That most tests are going to talk something about you in regards to these 5 factors. So let me give you a better description of these. And the spelling is still there for you. So as you sit here now, you might want to ask yourself, if these are the 5 big factors, what do you like in regards to your extroversion? Do you have a 0 to 10 score? A 0 would be you're more of a loner, quiet, passive, reserved, or a high score of being a joiner, talkative, active, very affectionate. Where are you on that? Oh, I'm not really low. I'm not all of those, but I have some of those. Well, maybe you're a 3 or a 4. You're leaning towards that level, or maybe you're leaning towards the other. Or maybe some of you, yeah, that's me. I'm a joiner. I'm talkative. I'm active and affectionate. Woo-hoo. I'm a 10 on that one. The importance of any time you ever take a personality test or any of these tests is not what the test says to you. You don't want to walk out and say, oh, this is who I am. You don't want to do that, but you want to say, well, it's something to think about. Something to think about. All right, where am I? There's something, it's good information for me to think about and then either agree or disagree with what these tests are saying. How do you fall on the agreeable scale? Suspicious, critical, ruthless, irritable, or trusting, lenient, and soft-hearted on the other side? Where do you fall on the conscientious side? Are you neglectant, lazy, disorganized, late all the time? Those people haven't come into class yet. Okay? Are you conscientious, hardworking, well-organized, punctual? Where are you on that? 0, 1, 5, 7, 8. Neuroticism. Are you calm, even-tempered, comfortable, unemotional, or worried, temperamental, self-conscious, emotional? Recognize that if you look at these words, some of these words sound positive, some don't sound so positive. But they're kind of mixed up, aren't they, in both levels that are there? And again, the answer is to this is just the way people are. Right? We should be able to figure out what our strengths are, use those strengths in our lives, but then also recognize where we have some work to do and what some of our weaknesses are and try to work on those. And the last one is, how open are you to experience, down to earth, uncreative, conventional, uncurious, or the opposite of that, imaginative, creative, original, and curious? Where do you fall on all of these? Who are you? What are you all about? There's another statement that I'll make to you, is that what we really need to know is we need to know the strength of our weaknesses and the weaknesses of our strengths. What does that mean? That people who fall in that balanced level there are probably healthier. These are my strengths, the things I do well, but the things you do well may also have a negative side to it. Okay? And the things that you don't do so well may also have a positive side to it, because there are balances to that. You're a very genuine, trusting, honest, open person. That's a real strength. That's great. The downside to that is you probably get taken advantage of a lot, okay, because you're so giving and everything else. So you got to watch that and learn to develop some balances that are there. So that's what we talk about understanding who you are, knowing yourself, accepting yourself, and being yourself. Just for the fun of it, this is one of these fun of it little personality tests. It doesn't have a lot of statistical reliability or validity to it, okay? But it's just kind of fun to do. What they did is they asked people, what style of music do you enjoy the most? And you were to pick 3. Right now, pick 3. What music you're really into. This is my 3 favorite types of music. I know there are other music that some of you listen to. I don't have up here. This wasn't my study. This was somebody else's study. Then what they did is they interviewed people, okay? They figured out what styles they liked. They interviewed them. They gave them personality profiles. And they came up with characteristics of people who enjoy certain types of music. So you ready? You got your 3? All right, so if you're into blues, jazz, classical, or folk, now, if you just see all 3 of yours are up there right now, then we'd probably say you have a high correlation, a high positive correlation with these characteristics. So if you have all 3 of these, I'd probably say that you, people who have aesthetic experiences, have good verbal abilities and are liberal and tolerant of others, tend to like music this type of music tends to be reflective and complex. If 3 of yours are up there, that's probably you. 2 out of 3, probably quite a few of those traits are you. 1 out of 3, pick the 1 or 2 traits that are you out of that. Those of you who are into rock, alternative, or heavy metal, These are people who are curious about new experiences, enjoy taking risks, and are physically active, prefer intense, rebellious music. 3 out of 3, that's probably you, right? 2 out of 3, more like you. 1 out of 3, you pick some words out. I haven't got to, probably a lot of you are here. Country, soundtrack, religious, pop music. These people are cheerful, conventional, extroverted, reliable, helpful. They're conservative, and they tend to enjoy upbeat, conventional type of mainstream music. 3 out of 3, that's probably you. 2 out of 3, a little less. 1 out of 3, pick words out. And then probably a lot of you are rap, hip-hop, soul, funk, electronic dance, whatever you call it. These people are talkative, full of energy, forgiving, and I don't know how they came up with the physically attractive part for this one, but I guess they were looking at people when they did this, and who reject conservative ideals, tend to prefer energetic, rhythmic music. 3 out of 3, is this you? 2 out of 3, 1 out of 3. Once again, it's a correlational study done that's just kind of fun to do and to look at. So where are you people? The category most fit into is which one? Now some of you your top 3 might be blues, alternative, and country or something like that. So it's hard to fit you in to different spots. You people are just unique and different. But once you like one music, by the way, usually you kind of blend to the other one. So what do we got in this class? I shouldn't have done that one. It's always hard for me to read. Let's see, I'll look up here. Oh, I can do it up here. 47% of you are, number 4, right? Rap, hip-hop, soul, funk. I have a big portion, 28, who are mainstream people. I got 15% of you are rock, alternative. And then the aesthetic people, blues, jazz, and classical folk. A little smaller level that's there, right? But that's you. Is it right? Is it wrong? Well, when we study personality, we try to say, no, there's no right or wrong. This is just who you are. Let's talk about the different theorists now. Sigmund Freud. Picture of Sigmund Freud where his always present cigar that he always had in his hand. When I explain to you what his theories are, then you can tell me what that cigar may have symbolized, okay, as we go through this. Sigmund Freud was probably considered to be the father of modern-day psychology. He wrote in the early 1900s, okay, through about the 1920s, early 1930s, okay. Everybody else who I will be presenting to you reacted to Freud, because Freud was the first one really to write about this. Very unique, very brilliant man. Kind of looks like his personality himself. He was a very strict, conservative, authoritarian individual. You don't want to get into an argument with him because he was always right. Some of the main parts of his theories. Nowadays, when we read about his theories, we kind of go, you're a little weird, Freud. I wonder what was going on with your mother when you were growing up. Okay, because some of his theories we kind of laugh about. But some of them, I think, were right on target. Matter of fact, Sigmund Freud's getting to be popular again. Okay, there was a time there where it was kind of like, we'll just talk about him for about 5 minutes. But he's becoming popular again because of the research that's done on the brain. Some of Sigmund Freud's works and his theories seem to match up with what we now know about the brain. So maybe he was really onto something here. The first thing that he talked about was called the structure of the personality. Each and every single one of you, according to Freud, have an id, superego, and an ego. It's the basic structure, foundation, okay, of your personality. What's the id? The id is the playful child that you have within you. It's the child that runs on what's called the pleasure principle. I want to be pleased, and I want to please now. I want to be pleased now. I want to be, you know what the word hedonistic means? It's all for pleasure. I want everything and I want it now. I just want to have a good time. Life is just fun. Please me, please me, please me. One is the id developed during infancy. Right? During infancy. I'm hungry. Give it to me now. My diaper needs to be changed. I'm bored. Pick me up. Me. It's all about me. Now, Freud said, though, even as adults, we sure have an id within us. Okay, we have an id there, a little child that might be a playful child, but maybe a spoiled child, or a lost child, or a hurt child, okay, or a wounded child, according to Freud, that we have deep within our unconsciousness that's there. It's the id that lies deep in our unconsciousness. It pops up every once in a while, especially if it's stored in the unconsciousness. Drink a little too much, smoke a little too much. Sometimes you're no longer thinking about consciously what's going on. All of a sudden you do things like, whoo-hoo, okay, without thinking about it, like a little child would, right? No remorse whatsoever. Next morning you might, but at that time you don't. Why? Because the id kind of takes over on you. The opposite of the id is called the superego. The opposite of the id. The superego develops around 2, 3, 4 years old. The superego is the parent that's within you. All right? It's this. It's poking your finger and saying, don't do this. This is what good boys do. This is what good girls do. It's all of the laws, regulations, mores, parental influences that tell you the way you should, must, have to run your lives. Freud always said deep within our unconsciousness there's a battle going on there between the id and the superego. And the more battle you have, the more neurotic you got, according to Freud, okay? And the more anxiety that you had, okay? I always think of this as, do you remember when you were a little kid, you used to watch these really old cartoons? Some of them were probably in black and white. And there was a devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder. And the devil was telling the kid, God, let's go do that. Ha, 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 I don't care. Just do it. Well, that's the id. And the superego was like the angel going, no, don't do that. You're not a good boy. People won't like you if you do that. Okay? So there's always that battle that goes on there. According to Freud, the balance between the id and the superego is something called the ego. And the ego is the adult that's within you, who wants to be emotional and caring and have fun, but also recognizes you need to live in this society and abide by its rules. If Freud said to you, you have a strong ego, that was a compliment, because that meant you were able to balance it off and live a good, healthy, adult-like, mature life. Nowadays, if we say, God, that guy's got such a big ego, okay, we really mean he's conceited, right? But Freud didn't use that term that way. It was the balance that people have. Id, ego, superego. I like this. I think Freud was on to something here. Okay? I think we all do have an id, superego, ego within us. Some of you are too id-driven. It's all about pleasure and fun. And those people probably aren't sitting here anymore. They dropped out. Okay? Some of you are too superego-driven. Okay, what am I going to do today? I'm going to get my little list. I'm going to get things done. Go, 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 go. Good, 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 good. You don't have a lot of fun. Hopefully more of you are ego-balanced and can balance off. Let that id out every once in a while and let the superego out every once in a while. So you're sitting in this class, somebody comes in late, and it's a really attractive person who comes in. And your id right away goes, ho, 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 I want to be with her or him. Yeah, like now. That's what I want. Maybe I'll just say to him or her, let's go do it now. Come on. Okay? Because that's your id, right? That's your id going, ah, I want it. Now the superego is probably also in your head, okay? In your what? Consciousness as well as your unconsciousness. And it's saying, what, that's gross. Grow up, will you? What do you think you are, 12 again or 14? God, that's inappropriate what you're saying. That's evil. You're bad. That's sinful. Don't do that. Okay? And then your ego goes, well, wait a minute now. She is kind of hot or he's kind of hot. We do want to experience that. No, we can't do that. So then the ego, if you have a strong ego, may come up with a plan, which is, let's introduce ourselves. After class go, oh, that was really kind of strange what he was talking about the id and the superego. And what do you think when Freud talked about penis envy? What was that all about? That was kind of weird. He's a weird guy, wasn't it, Freud? And you talk a little bit, and then the next day you talk again, the next day you talk again, then you have a cup of coffee, then you have lunch, then you have dinner, then you have sex. Now, what the ego is doing is saying, hey, hey, let's balance it off. We'll get what you want, but let's do it in a socially appropriate way. Okay? That's the balance that's there. Next week, we'll be talking about psychological disorders, and we're going to talk about multiple personalities. Okay? When you look at multiple personalities, there are always 3 distinct personalities first. 3 distinct personalities. What are they? A child who's been wounded and hurt, a super parental ego, super ego that's there, a parent that's trying to keep this person alive and stay at work and do different things and is very controlling, okay? And then there's an adult part that tries to help the person live their life. You get the id, superego, and ego, and then they split off from there. Sure seems to me that we all have this within us. And where does this all play out? Well, it plays out in what Freud came up with was levels of awareness. A lot of this goes on in the unconsciousness you're not even aware of. A lot of it we're conscious of, like you're conscious of your ego. Your id, by the way, you're not conscious of your id. Okay? The pre-consciousness is what's in between the consciousness and the unconsciousness. Things kind of bubble up sometimes from the unconsciousness. Sometimes you're just kind of laying around, you're getting kind of relaxed, and all of a sudden some thought pops up out of nowhere. It comes into the pre-consciousness. And then when it hits the pre-consciousness, there's one of those, what was that? What was that? And then when it hits the consciousness, it's clear. I would say, in some regards, the pre-consciousness is your intuition. I can't put my finger on it, but I don't like him. Why? I don't know. I don't like him. It may be this intuition, and then you don't know, and then you figure it out when it becomes part of your consciousness. Did you ever hear something called a Freudian slip? A Freudian slip is when you have unconscious feelings, but you're not aware of them, and they slip out from the pre-consciousness to the consciousness. So you have a opposite sex friend and you're heterosexual, okay? Opposite sex friend and you're heterosexual, and they're your friend. No romantic interest whatsoever. What do we call it? A platonic relationship, right? And you're going out and you're having a good time and you both had too much to drink, okay? And you come home and your platonic friend says, come on, I'll walk you to the door. It's kind of dark out. So they walk you to the door, okay, and they say, oh, good night, and they always give each other a hug and a kiss. But a lot of times the hug is kind of like this, and you kiss, maybe someone's on the lips or the chin. But this time you're like, oh, yeah, and they rub their pelvic area on your pelvic area, and they give you this big kiss on your lip. And they pull away, and both of you go, oh. And he goes, well, honey, sweetie, love, well, I'll see you tomorrow. All of a sudden, these words come popping out, love, sweetie, care, and he gives this big kiss, and he's embarrassed, and you're embarrassed, and the next morning we go, I don't know why I did that, you're my best friend, I don't know what the deal is. It's called a Freudian slip, because deep down in his unconsciousness, they don't want to be friends anymore, okay, and what happens, it just kind of slips out sometimes, a Freudian slip. You know, some of you, when you're in an argument with somebody, you just blah! You blast them sometimes, and then you say, well, I don't know why I said that. That just kind of slipped out. I really didn't mean it. I meant that was a joke, really. It slipped out. Now, I need to go to their defense and say sometimes they don't even know they feel that way because it came out of their unconsciousness. So this is where all this is stored. All right? The id resides in the unconsciousness. A lot of times we're not aware of those impulses that are there. The superego goes through all 3. The ego is in all 3 as well, but it's much more visible. We show to people what we think we should be living our life like, all the have-tos and shoulds, and also our ego side. But the id rolls around in the bottom there. One point. In Freudian theory, the blank is the executive structure which is directed by the reality principle. I consciously did not tell you this. What I told you was that the id worked on what principle? The pleasure principle, right? I want. I just gave away the answer. Okay? And the Superego was what? The parental part, the mores, morals, religious aspects that are there. So the answer is id, ego, Superman, or the libido. I didn't mean to give it away, but I just did. Some of you weren't listening, and you won't get it. Okay, we're done? All right, the answer is the superego. Come on. 79% are correct. No, the id is that childlike part that works on the pleasure principle. The ego, the balance part, works on the reality principle. And the superego, okay, is going to work more on the moral principle that's there, but what's right and what's wrong. Okay? All right, let's talk about Freud's most controversial part of his theory. Now, once again, Freud was the first person to talk about how what happened in your childhood, okay, is going to make you who you are and will predict how your personality develops, okay, as an adult. He was one of the first people to write about that. So he came up with a theory that said as you go through these psychosexual stages, based on your age, that's how your personality is going to develop, based on how you resolve these little issues. So as you go through these, you can giggle and laugh a little bit about some of these, because we kind of do, but I think it's interesting just to see what his theories are, because of many, many theories after him, okay, reacted to his stuff. The first one is called the oral stage of development. Now, there was another word on the previous slide that said libido. The libido, according to Freud, is your energy level that you have. And it's very related to your sex drive. That's why nowadays we say if you have a low libido, what we mean is a low sex drive. But what Freud said is that we all have a life instinct buried in our unconsciousness and a death instinct buried in our unconsciousness. And this life instinct is attached to, okay, the libido, the drive that you have. Freud also says it can be seen in all humans as a sex drive as well. This drive to procreate, this drive even to have sex that's there. So what Freud talked about in the oral stage of development, that an infant has this energy, this libido. Now, they don't want to have sex, right? They're an infant that's there, but they have all this energy, and this energy comes up, and somehow or another they need to learn to calm down that energy and manage that energy. How are they going to do that? Well, with the most well-developed part of their body, which is their mouth. So how does a child become passive and calm down? The mother's breast, the bottle, a thumb in their mouth, or a pacifier that we give kids. The kids just go, and they calm down. According to Freud, this is a real important way for a child to learn to regulate that energy. If the child they do not get weaned off the bottle, if you keep them on the damn pacifier too long and everything else, according to Freud, they may become orally fixated when they're adults. Therefore, they never learn to control their impulses. Therefore, they do drugs too much, okay? They talk too much. They shout things out all the time, okay? See what this is? As Freud said, what goes on in your childhood will predict how you become. So he said, depends upon how you work through these stages. Those of you who are weaned off the bottle appropriately and all that is fine, you don't have any oral fixations. The next stage is the anal stage of development, and this is where a child begins to develop the superego. The id develops during what? The oral stage, but the superego develops during the anal stage. Why? Because when a child is 2, 3, and 4, and 5 years old, they learn from their parents what they should do and what they shouldn't do. This is where a parent says, no, don't touch that. No, do that. Eat with a fork. Okay? Don't put that in your mouth. You're eating too much. This is where we're told how to live our lives, right? Now, one of the issues that Freud noticed, he used as a symbol of this stage, was teaching a child to be toilet trained. It's the first time you tell a child, no, you can't just let go anytime you want in oral development. Now you need to hold it in and wait and do it over there on that toilet. So the child is learning what? Rules and regulations about how to live their lives. So toilet training becomes symbolic. So Freud says if you weren't toilet trained correctly, okay, what winds up happening, you could become anally fixated. So some of you may become anal retentive. Have you ever heard that word? Oh, you're so anal. You're so anal retentive. These are the people that are always holding things in. All the time, holding things in. They're very controlling people. They're very organized people. Okay? They're always allowing themselves for... they're not very impulsive. Everything is planned out and organized. If you go into their house, everything is in order. The forks are in order. The spoons are in order. If you go into their closets are all very, very organized. Winter, spring, summer, fall clothing, shoes underneath it. Okay? Everything is super organized. Okay? That's how they live their life, in a very controlling manner. But maybe you didn't wind up that way. You're anal impulsive, which meant you never learned to control. So what do? You just let loose in your whole life. You spend your money all over the place. Where the anal retentive holds on to their money, they're stingy. What winds up happening, you go in their house, go into their closet, their clothes are like all over the floor. And when they say, I need to wear something today, and they go in there and they toss things around because they're so impulsive about everything. They're not very organized. So what he's doing is saying, that's how you wound up to be who you are because of these issues. Now, the next one is the most controversial one, okay? And this is where the child, according to Freud, the child is becoming aware of their sexuality a little bit more. They're beginning to feel these little feelings they have for other people. I like you. I want to hug you. That's there. And now, by the way, they're not sexual, because we're talking about 5 years old, 6 years old. It's not, children aren't, gee, I want to have sex with you. They just have these feelings. According to Freud, boys, okay, go through what's called an Oedipus complex. A boy becomes very attracted to his mother, okay? He wants to be with his mother, okay? Wants to sit in mommy's lap, give mommy hugs, kiss mommy, okay? Because he wants to possess his mother and get rid of his father. Now remember, according to Freud, all of this is unconscious. That's why it's so hard to prove Freud's work, because it's all unconscious. Okay? It's unconscious. The little boy doesn't say, gee, Mom, I'd like to have sex with you. No. The little boy's just saying, I like my mommy. I just have this feeling to be around my mommy. Boy, you can observe this sometimes. Sometimes you see little boys climbing into their mommy's laps, giving mom a hug, and looking over at dad going, my mommy. It's my mommy. Don't you come near my mommy. It's my mommy. Mom and dad are hugging and kissing. Little boy goes in between mom and dad, pushes him away, grabs mom and goes, it's my mommy. Leave her alone. Okay? Climbs into bed, pushes his feet right in dad's back. Get out of here. I want to be with my mommy. No, yes, yeah, that does happen. But the little boy, as he gets a little bit older, begins to recognize that daddy's bigger, taller, stronger. He sleeps with mommy, I don't. Okay? There are little different views that are going on there. The way they hug and kiss, the way I hug and kiss. And he begins to get a little bit afraid of his dad. And the reason why he gets afraid of his dad, because unconsciously he develops something called the castration anxiety he has. Because he's afraid that dad may recognize that he's trying to get rid of dad and get mom for himself, and he's afraid that dad may come along and cut off his penis, castrate him, and then turn him into, this is Freud's works, what Freud said, turn him into an inferior being called a female. Okay? Freud lived and wrote during the Victorian era. During the Victorian era, they considered women to be inferior. So this was Freud's way of saying, well, why do boys think they're superior? Why are they superior? Okay, well, the reason being is because of this castration anxiety. So at a certain age, little boys are going to push away from their mother and hang out with their dads. Dress like their dads, be with their dads, be a dad. And identify that. If the little boy doesn't go through that, and he doesn't get away from his mom, he's going to wind up as an adult, okay, looking to marry somebody who's like his mommy. Somebody to take care of him. Some of you women have gone out with those guys. They're mommy's boys, okay? And they're looking for a mommy and somebody just to take care of him. And they can be the most macho guy in the world, but it's still like, honey, would you? Honey, would you? Would you get this? Would you do this for me? Would you do this for me? Because they're still looking for a mommy. Now, the girls go through something as well. It's called the Electra complex. They climb into daddy's lap, give daddy a hug, look at mommy and go, it's my daddy. Stay away from my daddy. Do the same thing, pushing mommy away. But the little girl doesn't go through castration anxiety. She doesn't have one of those. But what she goes through is something called, you're really going to laugh at this one, penis envy. Okay? Because what she's envious of is the man's penis, because that's the symbol of superiority. So what happens here is she begins to identify with her mother, because she can't compete with her, so she identifies with her and realizes her position in life as an inferior being, and therefore becomes a woman. Don't throw things at me. That's what he said. Freud had a daughter. Her name was Anna Freud. Became a very popular and well-known writer in psychology as well. What was the first thing that she tossed out? Oh, all this stuff. She had some really great arguments with her. Dabs, kind of like, you really thought that I wanted to be with you? You know, like your views are right. Let me tell you about who's superior and inferior. So, go girl. She came on pretty strong to him, which was great. She was one of the only people really to argue with Freud. Freud says when we hit the latency stage, which is about first, second, third grade, 7, 8, 9 years old, a lot of that libido is hidden, it's latent, it's not there, it's pushed down below in your unconsciousness, but it's a normal time where we want to be with our same-sex friends. Boys are with boys, girls with girls. If you're a boy and you're in first grade, you hate girls. Girls are yucky. If you're a girl, boys drool and girls rule, or something like that. Okay? If you're a first grade teacher and you go, good, let's have 5 boys and 5 girls, all in the same group, forget about it. Massive fights going. I don't want to be with those girls. Those girls always tell us what to do. Hate you girls. Yeah, well, you boys are pigs anyway. Look at you. You're so sloppy. You always ruin everything. You're stupid. Okay? No, you don't remember that? First boy hating clubs and I hate you, girl hating. Well, that's what Freud talked about. Get this, though. He also says it's a normal, latent, hidden homosexual time where you become buddies and buddies with your buddies and you hang out all over them. Girls kiss each other and hang out with each other. Oh, you're my best buddy and stuff. And they connect that way. Not that it's homosexual, but it's a latent homosexual time that you have an attraction to your same-sex friends. Freud said, get stuck in this level that's there, you probably grew up to be homosexual. Okay? No research to back that up, but that's just Freud's theories. By the way, the girl with the Electra complex will grow up later on in life and look for a sugar daddy, somebody to take care of her. Somebody to take care of her. The genital stage is the last stage. Freud says if you make it to that, everything is fine, you'll be healthy. The genital stage, he says, is a normal time where our sexual drives become more conscious and we work it out in a more healthy way. But what Freud said was what? You go through these stages and you can predict what happens to people and their patterns of personality are developed later in their lives. Kind of weird stuff, right? Kind of interesting. So what do you think? Freud was a fraud? Strongly agree. Here, I don't like Freud. He's a weird guy. He was a fraud. Neutral, some of the stuff is good, some of it isn't. Or disagree. Okay, no, I don't think he was. Disagree, strongly disagree. You're saying there that you thought he was pretty interesting stuff. All right? So we got, a lot of you kind of neutral. I kind of feel the same way. Although the more I read about Freud, the more some of his stuff, I think, this is my answer, not the correct answer. I think some of his stuff was pretty interesting. Now, the Oedipus complex and all that other stuff, he had good observations that are there, but the more we learn about the brain, the more we realize there might be an unconsciousness, there might be a preconsciousness that are there. Looking at the id, ego, and superego, I think he's got something there. Let's talk about another guy by the name of Carl Jung. Carl Jung is not very popular. There's only one little section in your book about him, but I'm going to spend a little bit more time on him. He was a protege of Freud. Okay, he worked with Freud, and Freud considered him to be kind of like his second son, and he was going to be to write and continue on in Freud's work because he was a younger man than Freud, except that Jung completely disagreed with Freud on a lot of stuff. By the way, it's always fun to look at these people's backgrounds and see how their personality developed, and you wonder, I don't wonder, I know it influenced their personality theories. Freud's mother was only like 18 or 19 years old. She was married to Freud's father, who was in his late 40s, I think. She was his second wife, I believe. Freud actually had sisters that were his mother's age and older. Freud was a very, very spoiled little boy. His father was absent a lot, was distant a lot. He was a mama's boy. Did everything for his mommy. Okay? Must be some of his theories tied into that. Carl Jung, okay, was the only member of his family who was not a minister. His father was a minister, his grandfather was a minister, his great-grandfather, his great-great-great-grandfather, his great-great-great-great-grandfather, on and on. He actually grew up in a church and actually had his room above the church in the attic up there. Highly spiritual in his beliefs. He was also a well-known anthropologist, not in training, but he went around really researching different religions and cultures throughout the world. His theories are a little bit different. You ready? Stay awake. Okay? This is always a chapter where people kind of disappear a little bit. So come on back. Focus again. Sigmund Freud said we all had an unconsciousness, right? Jung called it a personal unconsciousness. That personal unconsciousness is all the memories you have of your current life. Everything that's happened to you in your current life. Jung said no. We don't have just a personal unconsciousness, we have a collective unconsciousness. And the collection unconsciousness is a collection of all of the memories of the entire human race you have access to. You have access to your parents' memories, their parents' memories, their parents' memories, their parents' memories, their parents' memories, all the way back to, according to Jung, to the Godhead, where we all came from. Not only do you have access to these memories, but when you put a thought out there, okay, she can pick it up at the same time, but it's unconscious, okay? It's all there. We are all connected through a life force that's there. And he says, I even have proof of this. I have proof through something called archetypes. Archetypes of symbols that are used by all cultures to indicate what might be going on in the unconsciousness. Archetypes are displayed in regards to artwork, music, theater productions, literature, religious symbols, icons that are there. Carl Jung said, I've studied the different religions of the world. They all have similar mythologies. It just depends on what type of the world you grew up in, okay? But they're all very, very similar. Carl Jung was one of the first people in the world who says, if we're all this similar, we're all interconnected, and our religions are so similar, why are we killing each other in the name of our gods? Because we think our God is better than your God, and I'm going to kill you because you don't believe in my God. Which has gone on, what? Forever. That's there. So as he began to study archetypes and symbols, he said, we're all pretty similar. That's there. There's an interconnection. How did they develop from an anthropological standpoint? The pyramids in Mexico. How did they do things at the similar time in Egypt, and similar times in South America, and similar times in China, when people couldn't get together? You couldn't get on the internet and communicate. How did an idea spring up in 4000 BC over here and spring up at the same time over there? What happened? Okay, did Kontiki go in his raft and go across?